All right. So transitioning then, we'll go into some of the fitness stuff and we'll kind of tie it all back together. For context, for the people who are watching, listening, you couldn't have known this, but Joe and I worked together. You hired me. How many months has it been now?
I think it was beginning of the year. So
Okay. Yeah,
going
that
on
sounds
5
right.
months.
I think you were waiting for like a month or so.
Yep.
Yeah. So probably started this year. I know the answer to these questions, but I'll ask for the viewer's sake. What is your training history like?
Pretty extensive. Like I said, I played football growing up through college. So I've been lifting since 7th grade. So 20 plus years at this point. And I would say, the style of lifting hasn't really changed all that much. A lot of, big primary movements, bench, squat, deadlift, a lot of explosive stuff. And I think once I, graduated, I missed that competitive side of things. So, kind of stuck with it, did CrossFit for a few years. Again, kind of leaning into the competitive side of things, but all in all, my training style over the last 20 years really hasn't changed much.
Okay. What about your, say, dieting history? What has your approach with your nutrition been like historically?
Well, before the last 5 years, probably no approach. I was just talking to someone the other day about in season during football, like I think back on the way we would eat after a game or practice or whatever, and the fact that we would lose weight over the course of the year is mind blowing. Like I'm talking about soda, ice cream, in college, endless amounts of beers. Like it's mind blowing the amount of calories we consumed, and the fact that we were still in a deficit is pretty remarkable. I think the whole idea of tracking macros and monitoring nutrition that way is a newer development for me. Sure. I've done it a little bit here and there, but probably not in earnest until you and I started working together. And I think for me, that's where the most room for improvement is, because I have, 35 years of habits to offset here.
Right.
I always tell folks at the gym, like, what you do at the gym matters totally, but we're only talking about an hour, 2 hours max tops. Like what you do with the remaining 23 or 22 hours is really what dictates your progress. And that's been learned a ton for sure.
What would you say you're hoping to accomplish within the scope of your fitness?
I think longevity is important to me. So I'm 35 now, I would like to be able to continue doing the things I want to do, proficiently, for as long as possible. I competed in my first powerlifting meet in November of last year. Hell yeah. I got another one in July. Training for something, especially with a group of people. So we've started to kind of create a crew at the yard of folks who are going to do the meet with me in July.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I think there's 6 of us, which is
that
cool.
would be a lot of fun to compete together.
Yeah. So I think having that camaraderie, that community, that shared accountability makes it much more enjoyable. Am I going to be doing meets for the rest of my life? Probably not. I don't know if I'm going to do 1 more or 5 more or 10 more. I don't know. But so long as I can stay strong, improving those movements and feel good, I think I'll keep doing them. But I think ultimately what I want, and I think you and I have discussed this a lot, is flexibility. I don't want the way I look or feel or perform to be necessarily dictated so much by any single given decision, and that gets into a whole host of factors around central nervous system and metabolism and all these things that before we started working together, I never really considered. I just assumed because I work out and I work hard and I'm strong, I'm good. And there's a lot more to it than that.
Yeah. So I'll quickly kind of run through our approach. If I miss anything, you let me know. But basically, since we started working together, where we've settled, and many iterations got us to this point, but in a very general sense, what we're doing, we track your sleep, your weight, your nutrition, your activity, and at least one habit at the moment we're keeping track of. For your training, 4 days, most weeks, right?
Yep.
Kind of an upper lower repeating. Mostly powerlifting focused, but we do still have in conjunction with that, some very specific skill work to improve your technique more rapidly. And then we fill in all the gaps in terms of both muscularity and functional strength with accessory work. But a big piece of that for you has definitely been figuring out like how much time can we commit to each of those sessions, right?
Yep.
Diet, we primarily are controlling through tracking. So you have macro targets to aim for, and most days you do that. So on the days that are logistically impossible or more difficult for you to track precisely, we do some combination. So most precise case would be you having maybe a calorie protein goal that you're gonna hold yourself to. Least precise case, so for you would be something like, there's a handful of strategies we'd employ, but basically to limit total calorie consumption and still have protein reasonably in range, where at the very least, you're not regressing, right? You're not gaining fat or losing muscle at an appreciable pace.
Yep.
So kind of like laying out what we currently do, what do you think to this point has been or have been your most difficult recurring obstacles?
Yeah, I think, it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier around structuring your days. Like, Monday through Friday, when I have work responsibilities, I typically have a workout scheduled or planned. It's much easier for me to structure my diet, around that day. I think when I have a little bit more free time or I'm traveling, it's easier to deviate from that. And when there's less structure in the day, I think that's where I struggle a bit. And I think, like I mentioned earlier, when I go back to my football playing days, we used to eat, drink, everything excessively after a game or practice, and ultimately by the end of the season granted we'd lose a lot of muscle, but we'd lose a ton of weight over the course of the season. And I think back about how many calories we were consuming during those cafeteria sessions, and it's pretty mind-blowing. So I think having that as, again, and it's been over 10 years now, but having that as a baseline of
it's like what you refer back to in your brain.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So
you remember what it was like to eat 5,000 calories.
Exactly. I can't do that anymore without regressing big time.
Yeah.
So I think building those habits and processes and systems, particularly on the weekends, particularly when I'm traveling, and I have less structure to my day, has been the biggest challenge.
I think that for a lot of people like you who have been very active in their past and maybe like you have consumed incredible amounts of food at once, you do have that frame of reference, which is difficult. But the bigger piece there between, you at 20 to you at 35 is going to be the change in metabolism. For a lot of people, that might boil down to not being as muscular over time. Many people will peak like in their 20s, early 20s, and they'll just decline for the rest of their lives in terms of muscularity and thus metabolism. For you, I don't think that's true. I don't think you're like way smaller or way bigger than you've been in the past. So the slowing of your metabolism, I don't think it boils down just to a difference in lean body mass. I also don't think it boils down to just simply age. People say that all the time, but I think a lot of that comes down to repeated cycles of attempts at dieting.
Yep.
Where essentially, let's say the first time you realize, oh man, I'm a little bit fatter than I like to be, and you attempted to diet down, your approach was probably something like this. Pretty tremendous calorie restriction, however you did it. Not quite enough protein, maybe not effective enough training to sustain muscle. So the end result then is maybe you did lose some fat, but then thereafter, like right away afterward, return to eating like normally. You gain a bunch of fat back rapidly. And with that extra weight came no additional metabolism, right? So now what you have is a position where you have the same fat to lose still, but a slightly slower metabolism.
Yep.
So maybe when you feel motivated, you then go again. And maybe not enough has been learned in that process. There's a new fad at that point where it's like, I'm going to try this other method of dieting. Do the same thing. So another cycle of rapid calorie restriction, rapid weight loss, perhaps cessation of that intervention. So basically you stop dieting, go back to eating normally at 5K calories, whatever it is, gain fat rapidly again. So now the next Joe has more fat to lose and again, slower metabolism. You do that enough times, you get to a point where maybe back in the day, from a combination of, kind of extremely high activity from practice and games, training, and fairly high metabolism, you could have eaten 5K and been fine. Nowadays, like maybe you could eat 2.5 and maintenance, maybe even gaining slightly, right?
Yep.
I think a lot of people struggle with that though, both for one, separating themselves, like their past selves from their current selves, because like if you are learning this now, it's not like you can do much immediately to go back to eating 5K. Nor would you really want to, I think. The other thing though is understanding that you can change your metabolism. It's just it requires a very consistent, concerted effort over a pretty long period of time. And it's important to understand though, like you said, some of the effects that you're feeling now are the effects of the accumulation of the past 15 years then, right? So it's not like, well, we can make progress pretty quickly if we know where to direct effort. It's not like we're going to undo 15 years of metabolic regression in, 5 months.
Right.
But we can do quite a bit. And I think even to this point, we've done a little bit of that. More onto the topic of you struggling, let's say on the days that are less structured, so your weekends, your short trips, the weddings you go to, and so on. Talk to me a little bit more. Like, why do you think you struggle in those situations so much?
I think one of it is one of the main factors is access and convenience, right? Like when I'm home, I'm in control of what's in the kitchen. And if the kitchen's empty, I know that 3 or 4 spots I can go to and reasonably stay within target. Whereas, and again, these are things you can prepare for with effort. But as we've discussed, I think effort, willpower, all these things are, despite my best efforts, are limited resources, right? So I think sometimes I'll get to Friday and, I will have worked, however many hours, I'll got my 4 or 5 workouts in, and I'll just feel tapped out in terms of making effort around those things.
Let's break that down a little bit just for the sake of our people listening or watching. So the thing we talked about was that whether this is true or not, let's pretend willpower, that we know it to be a finite resource. We only have X amount of willpower. I like to visualize it almost as like your, say like your HP or your stamina bar if you're playing a video game.
Yep.
And as you go through the day, you have to make however many decisions. The ones that you make well, the ones that are kind of tough choices, it depletes that resource. And it will recover over time, but it recovers slowly. So a lot of the strategies we employ comes down to things like planning, essentially putting in the effort when it's easy to do so before you actually need to make a choice.
Right.
So that future Joe doesn't have to deplete his willpower by making a really tough choice in the moment that, you're about to eat your, 3rd cheeseburger or whatever it is. That's probably not your weakness, but as an example, that's probably my weakness, if anything. But yeah, understanding that there is, at least, I guess, conceptualizing willpower as a finite resource is at least pragmatic, right? And doing everything you can to avoid unnecessarily large outputs of willpower is helpful. There will still be times though, and this is probably why it's helpful. There's still going to be times where you're going to be tested to exert that willpower and make a good choice anyway. And you want that to be reserved for when you have to, not when you could have otherwise avoided.
Right.
Is there any other reason why, or any other reasons why you think that separation? So like during the week, your structured days, you do well, you make really good progress. And on the weekends, that's been where you've struggled. Part of it, you said, just willpower, perhaps planning accordingly.
Yeah. I think part of it is, satisfaction seeking, for lack of a better term. Like I think, sometimes after a tough week, like you feel beaten down. So there's
I deserve this,
right? Exactly.
Okay.
But ultimately, many times those decisions will actually further compound the negative feeling and emotion.
And
So
perhaps the need for future reward like that, right? Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So yeah, I think that's a lot of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Recently, I had you go through kind of a weekend where you kind of committed to an SOP that was tighter
Yep.
than it normally would have been. And this was more of like an experiment, not necessarily for the result in your body comp or weigh-ins or whatever. It was more so just for you to get a feel for like, how bad is that really? How hard is that really?
Yep.
How did that go for you?
Yeah, I think what we had discussed was when I went into that situation,
Was it a
and
wedding?
I think it was,
Yeah.
yeah. There's been a lot of them this year.
Everybody that Joe knows is getting married this year.
I think, yeah, by going into that event, into that day with our operating procedure and committing to it, when those temptations, when I was confronted with them, the decision to say no was already made.
Sure.
So the perceived effort in that moment actually wasn't all that crazy because I knew going in I had already committed to it.
Yeah.
Whereas there have been other moments where you go into an event without a real plan, and the first moment that temptation is presented,
Mm.
you're trusting yourself to make kind of the right decision in an instant, and
Yeah.
I think that's much more difficult.
There are so many components of that too, because like at least culturally, for most people, food is a very social thing.
Yep.
I think that sometimes, I hope you don't mind me saying, but I think sometimes you and I have even discussed. There's a, say you're at a wedding, right, and it's like not your friend's wedding, it's like the wife's friends, and it's just like I don't know if I really want to be here, or maybe like a little anxious in like certain social situations. It's just easier to go like grab a drink,
Yeah.
right, or to I don't know whatever the thing is, eat more of it. It's just a little bit easier to do that sometimes than to let yourself sit with those uncomfortable feelings.
100%. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people use food in that way where it's comfort a lot of times. But um, part of our at least mental strategy we've talked about is one, like acknowledging that that's a pretty normal way to feel. So whatever the situation is, if you are uncomfortable, understanding that's normal and kind of just getting to a point where you're okay sitting in that feeling because it'll pass. And then making your choice. If it's food, especially, like don't make the choice because you feel this way. Wait, see if you actually want to eat the thing,
Right.
or drink the thing, whatever it is.
Right.
And if you do, great, fine, make that choice. But don't do it because you were temporarily uncomfortable.
Right.
Do you think that? And actually, sorry, backpedaling a little bit. So the takeaway for the people at home then, with regards to that experiment, would be frequently I've found that people overestimate how hard it would be to control themselves in whatever setting, but that's because they are assuming they have to do it in that moment. What we did differently was we had a discussion ahead of time. It's like, this is how this might go. These are the obstacles or the temptations I may be faced with. These are the choices I would like to make. So you already kind of knew in your head, you had a plan where it's like, these are the choices I plan on making now. I'm committed to them. So essentially by the time you get to the wedding and you are faced with these choices, it's, past Joe already putting the effort and the time and the thought. It's almost like wasteful then to not follow through with those choices.
Right.
And by doing it that way, I think that you save yourself a lot of that perceived effort. It doesn't feel like it's so hard. And this is not, I don't want the takeaway from this to be that you should always just try harder, or you should always just have a tighter plan or a more precise approach. It doesn't need to be that. It's more so that frequently the effort is not as much as you think it needs to be, so long as you're willing to spread it out. Like don't consolidate it to one moment in time. Spread it over the course of, maybe a longer window if you can. It just makes it a little bit easier to do that way. Do you think, are there any like particular weaknesses that you have? Like for me, I gave you the example of cheeseburgers because that really may be one of mine. What are those things for you, if there are any?
I think generally the things we've been discussing, like I think
Crack cocaine, heroin. Ricky's favorites as well. That's how he edits so fast.
yeah, I think just generally how did deal with and manage free time, particularly on the weekends.
Mhm.
I think there's a certain restlessness I have just generally, and I'm feeling like I'm always needing to do something. And I think sometimes in those moments, like that's a challenge for me to just like pull back a little bit and just enjoy the peace and quiet.
Yeah.
I think there's every temptation to open up my laptop and do some work or whatever it may be. I think staying present in those moments when I don't have much else going on is a challenge.
Yeah. How do you think that, or I guess, so that is definitely a tendency of yours. I know that to be true at this point. What other tendencies do you have that you think contribute to like some of the struggles you've had with regards to, I think for you, it's mostly that like training squared away.
Training squared away. And I think, again, I have 20 plus years of habit built there.
True.
So I think, for me, most days don't feel complete until that box is checked.
Yeah.
The habit and the routine, while improving, just isn't quite there when it comes to everything else around wellness. I think sleep is pretty good. I think I think we could all use a little bit more, but for the most part, my sleep is relatively dialed in. But I think being better about recovery, nutrition, and listening to my body a little bit more. I think, again, and sometimes that might mean skipping a workout day or scaling the workout back, versus having the program for that day and powering through it. I think those are all the things where I could really stand to benefit from.
So far, what do you think have been the most important things that you've changed that contributed to your success?
I think so. Since college, you're the first coach I've worked with, and
That means that I'm both the best and worst.
So I think bringing you in and again, going back to our discussion, granted it was around business, but bringing in expertise, accountability, and outsourcing that part of the equation to an expert, has been really valuable. And I think it's telling in all my in my lifting performance. Like, I'm expecting to perform significantly better than I did in November, just with the way things are trending. So,
yeah, I mean, even right now, just training numbers, you could, I would say comfortable with no taper. I could take you to the gym today, and I think you could beat all your previous meet numbers.
I think so too. Yeah, I think so too. And that's like, I keep saying, I've been doing this for 20 years, but the reality is that last 5-10%, whatever it is, like, that's what's really moving the needle here. Little form tweaks here and there, specifics around programming. I'm probably at 80% maybe where I want to be nutritionally, but I think that's also creating a more well-rounded athletic performance that's helping to power some of the gains here.
Yeah, I think that a lot of kind of my direction in my head that we've planned out for you, it's centered on this idea of like what you want very long term is like freedom, essentially, right? That actually probably applies across both aspects of, I guess, your business life and also your fitness life. But we don't get that for nothing. Like we kind of have to get to a point of earning it. So in the sense of training, like you say, you want to be able to do all the things you want to do for a very long time. Maybe that includes, competing in strength sports. Maybe it doesn't. But in order for you to do that, you do have to say, be proficient enough at the skill of a squat to be able to squat progressively for a very long time,
right.
Well into your 60, 70, 80, who knows, right? So foundationally, that's something that we've addressed. I think on the programming side, understanding that when you program, it's not necessarily like, how do we make this workout effective? Writing an effective workout is an easy thing to do. Writing an effective, 3-month period of training, that's much harder. It requires a lot of planning and forethought. And I think framing out your training that way is hopefully good exposure for you. But on the long term, I hope that you get to a point where you understand how to do that yourself. So you can zoom out and make sure that you are, like, every workout contributes to the continuous progression, right? And in that way, I think you make sure that you have the flexibility where if you did take a few weeks off of training, it's kind of fine because you know that the other 50 weeks out of the year were really, really useful. On the dieting side, that's trickier. I think that definitely metabolism, as we get a chance to probably post meet, push upward, make a really considered effort into dieting up precisely, incrementally. That'll actually probably be tough because you're going to have to be fairly precise to do this well. But doing that should then, in the future, afford us this position where you should be similar body comp. So not really any fatter, with more muscle, and also with the ability to eat more food at maintenance at every point along the way. So whether you're dieting up or dieting down, that should still be true. But that, when you get there, will afford you more flexibility. But between now and then, there's going to be a period of time where you have to maintain pretty high precision and thus pretty high effort. So I think a lot of that on the diet half is going to boil down to the way that you manage yourself. And I do believe that ties in a lot to your business life, if you'd say that. Which maybe brings us to another point, because one of the things that you are currently keeping track of is there's a habit we started tracking of planning.
Yeah.
And your approach to planning has changed, I would say 3 or 4 times at least since we started working together. But most recently, we've made it really simple, right? Do you mind sharing with the people?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's super straightforward. I think before we started working together, I was consistently getting 7 or 8 hours of sleep, but sleep time and wake times were a bit variable. Mm-hmm. So I think being consistent on wake times is something that we've done recently, and I've really benefited from waking up quite early, but giving myself time before the gyms are open, before there's any sort of interruption, to sit down, have an hour to myself, to plan for the day, and also to recap on the day prior, yep. Right? And inevitably, I failed in some aspects the day prior, but sure. I will say, by having that plan up front, I think there's probably a pretty strong correlation to those days where I have written out the plan, yep. to when I've gotten a good workout in and hit my macros versus not.
Those days tend to look really like you kind of check all the boxes that we see anyway on paper.
Totally.
And it's pretty early days to say that there's a strong trend. But I was even telling Ricky earlier that there's a correlation, at least, between the days that you have acknowledged that you actually carried out the plan, or planned at all, and the days where you are running through it, at least 90%. And yet, for context, important context, the way Joe is doing this is basically just, you take a sheet of paper, right? And you write down, and maybe multiple lists, but you have your list of things that you're hoping to accomplish that day. Some of them may be time bound, but you're doing this before. And then at the end of a day, you're taking some time to evaluate, what actually got done, and maybe what you could have done better. I think that the tangibility of doing that on paper and having the actual written thing is super helpful for a lot of people. This is not, though, to say that this is the way to do it. Right. It's a really simple way to start.
Right. Another thing I've tried to do is early on in this habit, I was listing everything. Mm-hmm. The list was, and I bucket my list across the different components of my life: personal, business, etc. And lately, what I've been trying to do is keep to each of those buckets no more than three things, because otherwise, I mean, when you first wake up, I'm usually a cup of coffee deep. Motivation is high and peaking at that moment, and you think you can take the whole world.
You can do 9 things at once.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So being reasonable with those goals, otherwise you're setting yourself up for failure.
Yeah.
Is really important. But yeah, I've been limiting specifically in each of those buckets the number of things I'm aiming to do to 3, which again is arbitrary, but I think upon reflection is reasonable.
Yeah. It's like on your business one, it says open my email, read my email, close my email. Those are the 3 for the day.
Exactly.
Great day.
Yeah. Yeah.
I used to do something, I wouldn't limit it to 3, but when I first started using that system, if you want to call it that, I was in college trying to figure out how to study effectively. And like, I was still training to compete and everything. What I would do is I'd have my list, like you, kind of like categorized by different aspects of life. I took a note card and I'd carve out like a little window on the note card. And I'd use that window so that basically I could only see one task at a time. And visually kind of like encouraged me to just focus on this thing, this one thing, do that until it's done and it's done well. And then only then do you pull up the note card to see, okay, what else is left? But I think that, did I give you the marble example at some point?
Yes. Yep.
So the marble example for the people, the 3 people, the marble example is basically this. If you had multiple, let's say you had 3 bowls here on this table, and we pretend we only have 3 categories of aspects of life that we care about. We have, maybe it's your family, maybe it is your personal life, maybe it is your career, right? And these 3 bowls, we have 1,000 marbles then to divide amongst these 3 bowls. Maybe people seem to think, okay, I'm going to put 200 in this bowl, I'm going to put 400 in this bowl, and I'm going to put 400 in this bowl. And it just stays. I believe that's an improper use of or utilization of your energy and attention. Instead, what I'd like to do is put 300 in each, right? Or sorry, 100 in each. So 100 of marbles here, here, and here. And the remaining 700 that I have at any given time belongs entirely in one of these, whatever I'm supposed to be focused on at this point. Most of my energy and attention goes to that thing. So while we're here doing this podcast, you have 90% of my energy and attention. My family, Christine, if she should need me, she's going to get that back real fast. But at the moment, while we're doing this thing, this is where it is, right?
Yep.
And I think being able to actually pick up all of your marbles, your energy and attention, and move them appropriately between different aspects is important. And it's important to be able to do that fairly completely.
Yep. I think very, very, I mean, this is getting like very much into the weeds, but one thing I've noticed myself doing is, and we talked about this, is I'll be working on something and literally as the page is loading, I'll hop to another tab and do something else. Yeah. Like that's my cue to shift because there's a couple of seconds.
Yeah, unless you're on dial up. Doesn't really make sense to me.
So one thing I've done coming out of that is like, I have one tab open on my browser at a time. I'm focusing on that thing, when I'm going through emails, I've had the mindset of like, either do the thing, delegate it, or snooze it. But like, just don't leave it lingering there. Yep. And I think that sort of decisiveness, actionability, focus is really important.
I think focus is a good way to kind of encapsulate that whole principle. And it's not just necessarily like lasering on the one thing. It's also being able to shift it when appropriate, but understanding that it really only belongs on one thing at a time.
Right. Like when I'm, and this is a challenge for I'm sure many gym owners, is if I'm working out at the gym, right? I'm either seeing a dumbbell that's out of place or something that needs to be cleaned, or someone's talking to me, which is great. I welcome the conversation, but a workout that should take me 90 minutes will take 2+ hours. Yep. Trying to and something I've been doing around that is I've been writing my workouts down, and outside of recording for you, I'll leave my phone in the other room.
Smart.
And just crank through the program. And in this last week, another thing I've been doing is I'll write the start time, like when I started working out, and then just budget for each block, give myself 10, 15, 20 minutes for each block, depending on what it is. And then you have an anticipated finish time. And inevitably I'm finishing longer than what I planned for, but usually, we're only talking about 5 or 10 minutes.
That's great. Yeah. And you'll learn real quickly. Like if you make the first handful of guesses for a few workouts and you're wrong, you'll learn quickly to either move faster or to just adjust that allowance, right?
Yep. 100%.
That same thing is true of like any sort of scheduling. But I do think you're right. Like most people, myself included, when we guess how long something takes, if we're guessing, we're wrong optimistically. That's like,
100%, yeah.
you know, okay, like for example, we're going to train later. And in my head, at first I was like, okay, that probably only takes, for me, it takes me an hour 40-ish to go through this session. It's like, maybe it's 2 hours. But no, in my actual day plan, I'll put down that it's, 2:45, 3 hours, whatever it was. Because on the off chance that it just takes way longer because, say, whatever happens, like maybe you're having a lot of trouble with your squatting today, I think.
Yep.
If you're having a hard time with your squats, we will figure that out. And I will make sure that we had time to do that by planning, if anything, you could say pessimistically, but pragmatically is the word I'd choose.
Yep.
Are there any other things that's like particular struggles that you are particular struggles that you're still in the midst of conquering within your fitness or adjacent, I guess?
Yeah. I think it's this again, kind of going back to this theme of balancing acts. Like, on one end of the spectrum, it's like, I tell myself I need to be super disciplined, work harder, pretty hard on myself, I would say, in a lot of ways. On the other end of the spectrum is like, you work hard, you deserve this, right? The optimal place is probably somewhere in between,
for sure.
And I think figuring out that balance is a constant work in progress for me. I think I owe a lot of my success to being on that far end of the intensity spectrum, right?
Yeah.
But there's also something to be said about like enjoying your life and having a little bit more peace.
You find that it's hard to let go of that? Because
yeah, 100%.
I almost feel like it's been so useful, it's been so integral to like my success in general, to like kick myself in the ass like so often, that even if I get to a point where I can afford to not do that, it feels almost like wrong to stop. The thing that helps me and may help you as well, kind of a similar idea that we just talked about, is just asking, like, when I find myself doing that, asking like, is this useful right now? Because there are many times where it's not. Like, if I don't need to be doing more and I'm like beating myself up over like being less productive or not optimizing my time.
Yeah, 100%.
What's the point?
Yeah.
And I do think that there's the way I describe it for myself, and maybe to you, but mostly to myself, and if this applies to you, great, it's almost like from a place of arrogance. Like I believe that what I've done is like so great, or like where I've arrived in my life is so amazing that I can only, it's almost like this belief that I exclusively earned that. Like I worked my ass off to earn where I am now, and it must have just been me.
Yeah.
I know that's not true.
Right.
My real belief is that there's a lot of like chance and luck and opportunity that kind of ended up getting me here. Like, sure, there was work involved, but none of that could have amounted to much of anything if not for some of the timing or, whatever chance exists. And that's something that helps me a lot to like anchor myself, is that arrogance is not a value that I want to have,
right?
Or I want to embrace. So if I remind myself that there's a little bit of arrogance in me that allows me to like, or is almost encouraging me to hold on to that piece when it's not useful, it's a good way to kind of smack myself in the face and go, stop doing that.
Yeah.
Don't be that way.
Yeah. And the other thing is, this is 100% self-imposed, right? Like,
Yeah.
No one is telling us to do anything.
Isn't that crazy?
And I think, again, there's something liberating in that. And like, we talked earlier about like, what's the worst thing that could happen when you're, working a 9 to 5 is you get fired. Like, there's no firing either of us right now. Again, there's
no, technically you could fire me.
I guess I could. Yeah. But
you are the client. You have that right.
But yeah, I think that's another thing is like, yeah, the sometimes the fact that this is all self-imposed, when you take a step back from it, it almost feels a little silly to get worked up over it,
For sure. One of the things that we've talked about more within the context of your diet that I know that you struggle with a bit, and this is one of those where if you don't want to speak about, we'll cut it. The kind of social aspects or maybe historical aspect of like consuming alcohol for you, that's been one of the things where disproportionately, I would say, just because it's so dense. Like if we measure how many calories are in, this volume of food, alcohol for anybody, it gets away very quickly because it is so dense. Why do you suspect? Because like a lot of times, like the weekends away where you've really, I think we could say done poorly, it's been because, you intended to have 2 drinks and instead it became however many it was, right? Why do you think that's been such a hard thing for you?
I think a lot of it's environment and habit, I think, in a lot of social situations, that's kind of the expectation.
Yeah. To be clear and for context, like Joe, you don't drink at home when you're working by yourself.
No. Yeah. I think, in certain social situations, that's kind of the way it's always been, and I think it took me until COVID to really like actually think like, is this normal? And I think a lot of people are starting to have kind of that reckoning, right?
It seems to be a bit of a trend now.
Yeah. So I think I see both sides of the argument. I think obviously overconsumption of alcohol has negative effects on every component of life.
Sure.
I can also see in social situations where it's like, if having a drink or 2, whatever your limit is, and maintaining that limit is, you're more likely to socialize and be a part of a community and participate in those social activities. If that's a prerequisite, like I think it can be a net benefit.
Yeah.
I think with COVID, we learned a couple of things. One, we learned the detriments of isolation, right? So, if being sober means being a total recluse and not socializing whatsoever, like that's probably not a net benefit, right?
Yeah.
But there's also people who drinking reclusivity as well, right? So like that's a double whammy. So it's a complicated thing, I think, and yeah, I think I'm more aware of it now and I think many people are more aware of it now than they ever were before. I think prior to the last 5 years, I viewed it as empty calories, but it's so much more than that,
Yeah.
And I think, during the times where I am choosing to abstain, I see not only in body comp weight, all that stuff, but in performance and energy. There's definitely tangible benefits.
Yeah. I mean, I think important info for people listening is that, you're right. I think a lot of people, they kind of underestimate the effect. So like as a coach, I'm never going to tell somebody like, you're all grown-ups. I'm not going to tell you like, hey, you can't drink or you shouldn't even. I'm not willing to go that far. But what I do want to make sure is that you understand what compromises exist so that you make whatever choice you do with all of the pieces there. Because like you said, a lot of times in the past, it was probably like maybe you drink on Saturday, Sunday, and you come into the gym Monday wondering why am I so weak today?
Yeah.
But like, it's a pretty easy answer. Like a lot of it probably dehydration, but even on the longer term, especially with a consistent consumption, it's not to get too lost in the nitty gritty, but it's a decrease in translational efficiency. So the rate at which we produce new proteins is going to be slowed by alcohol consumption, like relative to dose size. So the more you drink, the more you affect protein, the rate of protein production. But like all of these factors exist alongside the extra calories that really come with no real increase in fullness. For a lot of people, they drink and they're still hungry.
Yep.
So they also eat.
Yep.
And then that's like compounded.
And inhibitions are weakened, right? And they eat more or eat things they wouldn't have eaten. You know?
But I mean, to your point though, I do agree that like, especially in a social setting, it can be a bit limiting. If you're the one person who is not then drinking, to single yourself out that way is, at least in some contexts, maybe poor strategy, if nothing else.
Yeah.
But I would also posit to most people, just like we went through that experiment with you on a weekend where it's like, try to do this more precise execution, see how that feels. A lot of people probably overestimate how like terrible it's going to be
Right.
to not drink in a setting like that. And I'd encourage many people who are maybe struggling with that in the context of their diets, try it. Like try to abstain once, see what it feels like. Sure, there will probably be comments made by your family or friends like once or twice, but they also probably won't care past the 30 seconds that they notice.
Right. 100%. Like we said earlier, people are dealing with their own shit, right?
Yeah.
Like they're moving on and forgetting about you faster than you'd realize.
Absolutely. Joe, what would you say is the most valuable thing that people could learn from you? Calculus? Not
Definitely,
that.
definitely not calculus.
Me neither. If that's what you came here for, you are shit out of luck.
Yeah, I don't know. I think going through this experience with you, but also generally just like really diving into fitness over the last 3+ years has been really humbling in a lot of ways. I think leading up to this point, or leading up to before starting the yard, I think I viewed myself as a healthy, active person, and I think as I'm taking in more content from more sources and all the different approaches to fitness are kind of swirling around, I think feelings of self-criticism and comparing myself to others and all that stuff can sometimes be pretty daunting.
Yeah.
And, I think externally, while it may appear that, I have things under control, like it's a struggle. It's hard, and I think a lot of the stuff you'll see on social media, A, underestimates the time and effort and willpower it took to get to that point.
Right.
And B, just oversimplifies things, Go get outside and get 10,000 steps a day and you're good. And for a lot of people, like that's a starting point and that's probably a good place to start.
Yeah.
But I think I think it's a disservice to people who are really working their asses off.
Yeah.
To simplify things that much. Like it goes much deeper than that. And I think it's hard. And I think, I'm struggling with it. I'm sure a lot of other people out there watching are struggling with it. So I think, take comfort in the fact that it's not easy even for people who are in the industry. And just trying to promote this mindset of taking it one day at a time, one decision at a time, is really the way to approach it. You can have a plan and effect, and that has, at least in my case, has been really beneficial. But sometimes the plan goes astray, things come up, and you're going to deviate. And the most important thing is getting back on track versus letting that spiral.
Yeah. I think maybe that the most valuable work that we've done together, then it's not like you didn't know what you could do to elicit whatever effect. It's more so figuring out how do you actually employ that in real life?
Yeah.
Because there are so many people ask questions like, what is the best diet or what is the best training program? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
The answer is that the real answer is that it depends on so many things. But even if we knew that answer for every specific person, it kind of wouldn't matter, because the real question, the important question still is going to be, how do we actually do that within the context of your life?
Right.
Without making undue compromise everywhere else. Like it can't be like, what is the program that gets Joe to, break 1,500 pounds on his total next year or whatever, if it comes at the cost of your business,
right,
or relationships, what have you, right?
Yep.
But I think that is very astute. Joe, where can people find you?
Yeah, so you can follow us on Instagram. The Yard's handle is goyard.fit. That's also our website, so you can check us out there. My personal handle is JM Cicero. And cool. Thanks for having me on, man.
Thank you for coming all the way out here.
Appreciate it.